let's talk skincare ingredient trends. What do they do and which ones actually work? I'm Michelle, my PhD is in medicinal chemistry, which is really useful for this sort of topic. I recently wrote a journal article about skincare ingredient trends with my friend Hannah English, but we did have a word count, so we're going into much more detail now. I'll be covering half the ingredients. Check out Hannah's video for the other half. Starting with advanced delivery systems. Now, these aren't active ingredients themselves, but they're technologies that you can use with tons of active ingredients. It's all about getting them into your skin so they can actually do something, and there are two main parts to this. First off, absorption. The top of your skin has a bunch of dead skin layers that act as a really effective barrier. It's called the stratum corneum. So most things do not get through skin easily, and this includes skincare ingredients. Delivery systems, they can disrupt these layers and help the ingredients absorb. The second part is stability. Some ingredients break down in the bottle or on your skin, and once they do that, they can't work. And on top of that, the stuff that they turn into, that can also be irritating. So delivery systems can help ingredients stay more stable. Most delivery systems were originally developed for drug products. I actually looked into making one during my PhD. But now they've made their way into regular skincare products. You can find them even in really budget-friendly products. So you might have noticed that I've been talking less and less about active percentages, and delivery systems are a big part of why. Okay, so these numbers are purely theoretical, but let's say we have a product that has 1% retinol, but then half of it breaks down in the bottle before it even gets near your skin, and then 95% of it just doesn't absorb. So that only leaves us with 0.025% getting into your skin. Let's say we have another product that has 0.3% retinol, but it's in a good delivery system, it stays stable, so only 10% of it will decompose. And again, because of the delivery system, only 80% of it stays on top of skin. That means that we end up with 0.054% getting into skin. And so that's actually more than twice as much as our original one. But if you're just looking at the percentage on the label, then you would have picked the less effective product. I mentioned this in my body products video. The EU has lowered the retinol allowed in products. And I think this is probably one of the reasons delivery systems are really trending. Delivery systems mean that you can still get the same or maybe even better results, even with lower active percentages. Now, the umbrella category of delivery system that I've just been seeing everywhere is encapsulation. And basically this means the active ingredient is wrapped in a shell that protects it. It's a bit like popping boba. There are lots of different types of encapsulation. Liposomes are one of the big ones. They're tiny balls made of phospholipids, and these are like the chemicals that are in your cell membranes. They look like this. With the older type of liposomes, the main way these seem to get things deeper into your skin is by merging with stuff in your skin barrier at the top of it and just disrupting that barrier, sort of like how a cleanser would, but on a much smaller scale. But there are also newer liposome types that can actually travel deeper. Cyclodextrins, these are one of my favorite types of encapsulation because I think it's really neat, and it's also kind of sentimental for me because I did a bunch of experiments with them for a summer research project. These are sort of like microscopic donuts made of sugar molecules, like a ring made out of rings, I guess. The super cool thing is that the outside likes water, but the inside likes oil. So you can actually use cyclodextrins to get oily ingredients into water-based formulas. They come in lots of different sizes, so you can encapsulate a lot of different ingredients in them. And at the moment, they're used in lots of retinol products. Retinol is super unstable, but the donut bonds to it and it actually gets in the way so it can't break down. So if you know organic chemistry, it's basically acting like a protecting group. Then after you've put it on your skin, enzymes come in and chew up the donut, it breaks it down, and the retinol gets released and can start working. Cyclodextrins are also in odor neutralizing sprays like Febreze. The donuts will actually catch the scent molecule, and so the scent molecule can't get into the nose and bind to the receptors that make it smell bad. It's really neat. One of the questions I always ask about encapsulated products is, it's not like if you wrap an ingredient, that is automatically going to work better. Whether it works will also depend on things like if the formulation is appropriate. So for example, if the capsules release that active ingredient too early while it's still in the packaging, then you don't get those delivery and stabilizing benefits of encapsulation. You just end up back at a normal product. Or on the flip side, if the active ingredient really likes the capsule and it doesn't release fast enough after you've put it on your skin, then you just kind of end up washing off that unpopped boba, or the unpopped boba just sheds with your skin cells. Then we have more microneedling type delivery systems, starting with derma rollers and derma stamps. These are tools with tiny needles. It's kind of medieval, they basically just poke tiny tunnels into the skin, so potentially ingredients can get deeper with these. This doesn't always happen, it's not like having holes is a magic way for anything to go in, but it is promising for some ingredients. So for example, tranexamic acid, that doesn't get into skin very easily, but some studies have used microneedling with it. But you can get longer needles that go into the living epidermis for even deeper penetration, or even into the dermis, and that means you can do controlled damage, and that stimulates your skin's healing response. This creates more collagen and plumps up your skin. It can even smooth out old acne marks and stretch marks. Now there are risks with these. Obviously you are poking holes into your skin, so we have the risk of infection. You can sanitize the tool and the surface of your skin, but you can still spread things like warts across your skin. The other risk I don't see people talk about is with what products you're using with these tools. Now most products are not designed or tested for getting directly onto your living cells. They aren't sterile. Their safety is basically calculated based on the fact that your skin is going to block out a lot of the ingredients and all the other stuff in the product. It's kind of like how if you wash a cucumber, you can safely eat it, but that same level of washing isn't going to make the cucumber safe to inject into your bloodstream. I mean, microneedling is a lot less extreme, but it is the same concept. If you derma roll the wrong product into your skin, that can backfire and make your skin really irritated and inflamed, and that could actually lead to less collagen and more pigment, which that's probably the opposite of what you are going for. There is a new trend of microinfusion, and this is where you have products that come with hollow microneedles. And so these are usually 0.5 millimeter long, they stay in the epidermis. Now in theory, this should be safer than using other products because the serum should be specifically designed for this. They are usually sterile. But looking at the ingredients in some of these products, there are a lot of choices that I would question. Some of them have natural ingredients, and for something that you're injecting, that is not a good thing. Nature is full of allergens. And I've seen dermatologists doing sponsored posts promoting these. I would think that they would be a bit more cautious. Now, I actually tried to give one of these systems the benefit of the doubt. I don't react to that many skincare products, but after a few days, I broke out in lots of tiny fluid-filled bumps in the pattern of the needles, like it was literally in the shape. I actually sanitized my skin more than they said to, and I also tried the serum just on my skin without the needles, and that was fine. I tried it a second time because, for science, and the same thing happened, so it was definitely the product. Luckily, I didn't seem to have any permanent scarring, but each time it did take about 2 weeks to stop being bumpy, and then a few more weeks for the pigment marks to actually go away. So in my opinion, for microneedling, it's just much safer to go to a clinic. If you want to do it at home, then you should be really careful. Either go with the short needles if you want to use them with products, or if you want the benefits of deeper needles and you are okay with the risk, I would do it on bare sanitized skin, no products. Make sure you sanitize everything properly, there are tutorials online, and don't do too much. Onto products that have microneedles in them. One version I've talked about before are microneedle patches. These have little spikes that stab a little bit into your skin and then dissolve. And these spikes are usually made of hyaluronic acid. Hyaluronic acid is fine, by the way. My theory for why some people get irritated skin from it is that it's actually really good at delivering other ingredients. It's used in drug delivery systems, and it's actually in a lot of tretinoin formulas, and we know those are really well clinically tested. Anyway, some brands do put other ingredients in the needles, and they are water-free, which helps keep whatever actors more stable. The downside is that these do need a lot of packaging to stop the needles from wilting or getting crushed before you use them. The needles are short enough that you don't have to worry about infection. There's also usually a lot less going on with the ingredients. They also do not hurt, and some brands actually started trying to call these micro darts to make them sound less hurty. There's just generally not a lot you can do to mess these up. The main risk is that the needles will get the ingredients deeper, and the patch also seals the ingredients into your skin more. So any sort of skin reaction is probably just going to be a lot bigger. Spicules are the newest trend, and these are essentially microneedles inside the product. I've talked about them in other videos before. They are usually listed as hydrolyzed sponge or silica. When you rub them on, they either exfoliate your skin a bit so it gets rid of some upper dead skin layers, or they stick into your skin and create microchannels so ingredients can potentially get deeper. The main benefit seems to be just smoothing out your skin texture and making pores look smaller. So like a lot of other microneedling, the ingredient delivery, that is more of a question mark. The next trend is derivatives. These are almost like a delivery system. They have a lot of similarities with encapsulation. It is kind of the same basic idea. So you use existing active ingredients, but you modify them in some way so that they penetrate better into skin, or they're more stable, or ideally both. The main derivatives you'll see are vitamin A or C, and that's because retinol and ascorbic acid, which are the most proven versions of these vitamins, they are pretty unstable and irritating. Plus, there's also been that lower EU limit for retinol and 2 retinol esters, so a lot of derivatives have gotten a lot more popular. With derivatives, it's the actual molecule that's modified, they aren't just wrapped up in something. But they have similar issues to encapsulation. So sometimes, depending on the formula, they aren't actually more stable. Some of them aren't active on their own, and the evidence that they turn back into some sort of active form after you've put them on your skin, that is sometimes a bit questionable. But derivatives are a well-known strategy with drugs. They are called prodrugs, and again, it's something that's made its way into cosmetics. I know I keep saying I'll do proper videos going through vitamin A and C derivatives, and I swear I'm trying. I have about 20,000 words of notes on them. But the thing that's making it really difficult is how spotty all the data is. I keep on hoping that there'll be better data coming out, and sometimes it does, which makes this worse. A lot of the info that you see comes from ingredient companies, and whether or not you can actually trust them is largely based on vibes. If any brand wants to share more info with me, please hit me up. But for now, my favorite vitamin C derivatives are 3-O-ethyl ascorbic acid, ascorbyl glucoside, and THDA, which is a bit more of a risky pick, but there were new studies that came out that were really promising. For retinol derivatives, my favorite is Retinol, which is probably one of the most active ones, assuming it hasn't broken down and it still absorbs. I also quite like retinol propionate, acetate, and retinoate. There's also a new adapalene derivative, but I don't really see the point in that one. There is barely any data on it, and adapalene is already an over-the-counter drug in tons of places. A little rant/tangent on retinol alternatives. This is a trend that's linked to clean beauty. Somehow retinol is dirty for some reason. The main one is Bakuchiol. I wrote an article on Bakuchiol back in 2019, but I don't think I ever talked about it properly in a YouTube video, so people keep asking me about it. Bakuchiol is not a retinoid, it doesn't work at the same receptors. It does do some of the more general same things to skin, but so do tons of ingredients that we don't think of as retinol alternatives, like glycolic acid. So this is mostly just Bakuchiol, hitching a ride on retinol's coattails because of, I guess, clever marketing. People just think Bakuchiol is like retinol now. But the amount of evidence for Bakuchiol is just tiny compared to retinol, and also compared to tons of ingredients like poor glycolic acid. There is a clinical trial where Bakuchiol was compared with retinol, but it wasn't very good, plus Bakuchiol was actually used twice a day, retinol was only used once a day. I also see people saying Bakuchiol is like retinol, but without any of the downsides, and that's just not true. The whole "it's safe if you're pregnant," Bakuchiol has not been tested for pregnancy, so you cannot make that claim, and all the evidence points towards retinol being safe for pregnancy anyway. Now, your own risk tolerance might be different. I go through the EU risk assessment on it in my body care video. Also, natural retinol. Retinol is natural, it's in eggs, it's already naturally in your skin. Anyway, this marketing was so successful that there are now a whole bunch of other retinol alternative ingredients coming out, and they have even less evidence. And sometimes I feel like ingredient manufacturers are specifically trying to piss me off. Microbiome. I feel like this trend has been going on for a while and it hasn't really taken off, but there is really interesting science behind it. Maybe the reason is because the science is pretty messy. Basically, the skin microbiome is the community of microorganisms on your skin. There's been tons of research on it. It seems to be involved in lots of skin functions. It is super fascinating, but the research isn't quite at the point where scientists can confidently say, this is what a healthy skin microbiome looks like. So it's even harder to confidently say what products you need to use to make your microbiome more healthy. At the same time, it does seem to be one of the reasons that giving your skin a break works so well for some people. It's just maybe they're letting their microbiome recover. So I think there is a lot of promise with microbiome supporting products, but it is just really difficult to recommend anything specific. There's actually been deceptive advertising complaints with claims like microbiome gentle and nourishing the microbiome because the evidence just isn't really there. So if you do want to try it out, I recommend looking for clinical testing evidence, things like 90% of people saw whatever. Otherwise, track how your skin responds to that specific product. There are some microbiome adjacent claims. So probiotics, for example, these are living microbes that are meant to be beneficial. They don't actually work in standard skincare products because those have preservatives to keep them safe, and they would kill any living microbes. So instead, a lot of products have what are called postbiotics, and these are sometimes called probiotic extracts. Basically, these are dead or broken up microorganisms, or the stuff that they poop out. They're also called ferments or lysates. And there is this myth that fermentation will always make any ingredient more powerful and better for your skin. No, the effects depend on the microorganism and what it is you're feeding them. But there are specific ferments that have benefits. There are a whole bunch in really cult skincare products. Prebiotics are basically food for microbes, and a lot of them, in theory, could feed beneficial microbes more. And there is cool research on this. But again, it's hard to say how well they work, and I forgot to mention this earlier, there's also probably a lot of individual variation in what your microbiome is and how to get it back to, healthy. So again, I would just say look for clinical testing and reviews and just see how they work on your own skin. In general, at least, they tend to be good humectant moisturizers. Now, hypochlorous acid, I talked about this in my body care products video, but essentially it might work just by wiping out surface microbes, and from the research on microbiome, this is probably not a great thing to be doing too regularly. It's probably not as extreme as constantly wiping out your gut bacteria with antibiotics, but it is a similar concept. You have good microbes that keep the bad microbes in check, and if you keep wiping everything out, the bad microbes can take hold and your microbiome goes out of whack. Quite a few people have had irritation from hypochlorous acid, and maybe disrupting the microbiome could be why. The evidence for hypochlorous acid and acne is pretty weak. Benzoyl peroxide does a similar thing, but it is just much better tested. Some people have found it helpful for eczema and rosacea. Those are linked to specific microorganisms. But I do really question whether it is good to be using these long term and relying on wiping everything out. The next trend, menopause skincare. People on average are getting older, so there's been a massive boom in menopause products, especially supplements, but also skincare. Dr. Jen Gunter is a gynecologist who's talked about how predatory a lot of these products and marketing are, and it is a really familiar story. We have a condition that mostly affects women. There aren't a ton of menopause-informed doctors, so people end up desperate and they want solutions. And unfortunately, there are a lot of very shady people who are really happy to give you a fake solution. Now, during menopause, your hormones change, and the big one for skin is estrogen. It decreases a lot, and it means that your skin will lose collagen, it gets thinner, it goes drier, and it becomes more sensitive. Now, these things do happen as you age anyway, but it speeds up a lot of menopause. So a lot of menopause skincare is just standard anti-aging products. Maybe they are a bit more moisturizing. But there's also a few products that specifically work on hormones, and the main ones are estrogen creams. You might have seen viral videos where people are rubbing vaginal estrogen onto their faces. Now, a few things to know before you start doing that. First off, if you aren't at menopause yet, these are probably not going to do much. There are a few clinical studies on supplementing estrogen around menopause, and they notice some skin benefits. But the big issue is that some estrogens, they absorb into your bloodstream, and estrogens are linked to some cancers. If you're applying on 2 areas instead of 1, then the risk is going to be different. So talk to your doctor, don't just start slapping it on. Prescription drugs are prescription because of potential risks. There are also a lot of telederm companies that have started marketing estrogen face creams, and from the reports, technically you do talk to a doctor, but the actual supervision and screening just seems kind of half-assed. If you have melasma, then yes, there is a good chance that estrogen will make your pigment darker, but the risk might be worth it for you. Again, you need to talk to your doctor. There are a few estrogen-related active ingredients that might have similar benefits, but with less risk. Phytoestrogens, these are plant compounds that tend to bind to the beta estrogen receptor better than the alpha receptor. Beta is the one in your skin, alpha is the one that's more closely linked to ovarian and uterine cancers. So far, these don't seem to work as strongly, but they are promising. There's also a really cool ingredient called methyl estradioropanoate. Basically, this is an estrogen that is active in the skin, but if it gets too deep and gets to your bloodstream, it gets metabolized into an inactive version. And this, at the moment, it's only in a handful of products. But overall, I think all of these ingredients are just less reliable, and some are also riskier than so many standard anti-aging ingredients. So those are really worth trying first, and also just getting a basic skincare routine in order. I have an ebook on that. Hannah covers the other trends like exosomes, anti-pollution, and new permitted ingredients in her video. Make sure you check that out. I also have a playlist of skincare science videos. See you next time.